Hello all, welcome to Make It with NPL. Today we're going to be focusing on role-playing games at home, specifically on Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition today. So my name is Kristi Cates, and with me is Jane Jankowski and Julia Kozak-Halligan. And we are going to teach you a little bit about the basics of character creation and some of the gameplay in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So if you're brand new to the game, do not worry about it. It's not as intimidating as it seems, and it's really fun to learn together as a group. We're going to start off with a little bit about making your character. So this is the time to think about what kind of character you want to be, how you want to play the game. So picture yourself in a fantasy world. Would you want to be the huge, tough fighter type? Do you want to be the smooth talking bard that kind of sweet talks everybody that your party meets? Maybe you just wanted to have all the magic and be a wizard. So think about the kind of things you want your character to be able to do in the game. You can also even think about if you have a favorite character from like a TV series or a book, you could base some of your details off of that character as a great starting point. So the main things to consider when you're creating your character is your character's race, class, and their background. So these are going to give you all of the statistics and abilities that you will use to actually play the game. So when you're determining all of this, you will be filling out your character sheet. And we have examples we can show you. And we're also going to provide some links, I believe, for some places that you can download character sheets for free online. And you can download ones that you can print out and then fill out yourself in pencil, or there are also form fillable PDFs so that you can do it all online. There are also various websites that provide you with character creation help and even some character generators if you want to maybe not start immediately from scratch. All right, so what you are all seeing right now is a copy of, this is a PDF file of a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition character sheet. And this is one you might be able to see you can fill in and have on your computer or device and save. And then it's very easy to update because you can just jump in there and type in the numbers that you need. Now there's lots of boxes on this page and it might look a little intimidating at first, but right at the top you'll see you got a space for your character name. You don't need to worry about that quite yet unless you've already got the perfect name in mind. So what we're focusing on is our class, our race, and our background. And once we determine those, it will help us know what to put in here where you see these are our ability scores. We have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And don't stress about that too much right now. We will come back to that. And then we have things like your hit points, you know, how tough you are, how much damage you take in a battle. You have a spot here where you can put all of your weapons and your attacks that you might have. You have your character skills. And then there's lots of room to put down things like your individual features and traits, abilities that your character has, your equipment, your languages. This particular version of the character sheet has a second page that lets you actually get into like your appearance and your background a little bit more. So if you wanted, you could even in this box right here, draw an image, draw what you picture your character as. You've got room for all of your backstory and everything like that. So if you want to really get into your character creation, there's plenty of room for you to do so. And then the last page, if you are part of one of the classes that uses spells and magic, this will be an important page for you because it's where you list all of your spells and how many spell slots you have and have used. So how much magic you have to use for the day and how many of those slots that you've used. So we will come back to the character sheet more later, and again we will provide you with a link to the character sheet so you can take a look at it yourself.
I think it's important to say right away, many of the boxes on that character sheet do not need to be filled out right away, right?
Yes.
If you want to just jump in and play, you can do, about a third of all of that and have a playable character. So if that's looking intimidating, if it's looking like a lot of numbers and background, it doesn't have to be. It's a canvas big enough for experienced players to really get into the nitty-gritty if they want, but it definitely, many of those boxes can be not at all filled out when you start, or very minimally.
Yeah, you may not know much of your backstory when you start, and that's fine. You don't have to have a fully fleshed out character as you're just starting to play. Some of that will develop too through your role playing with the other people in your game. But that is the basics of the character sheet. Julie is going to tell you a little bit more about the different races and how to choose one for your character. Before we go into that, Jane is going to talk briefly about the 6 ability scores and how they relate to your race and your class and your party makeup.
Sure, thanks, Kristi. Okay, so those 6 scores, right? There's 3 that are sort of more physical stuff, right? So that's Constitution, basically how hardy, how strong is your immune system, right? How tough are you? Strength, so you can have really good Constitution, but maybe not be very strong if you're not very big. Dexterity, that's dodging, acrobatic stuff. It figures into how hard you are to hit, or how skillful you are in anything sort of gymnastic. Then you've got the other 3 scores that are more mental: intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So intelligence is book learning. Wisdom is more street smarts or just plain common sense. So you can have very intelligent and very unwise characters, which is sometimes fun on a party if chaotic. And finally, charisma, anything to do with interacting with other people, charming them, persuading them, intimidating them. So your character is going to have a certain number of points to distribute between those 6 skills, so you can't be really good at all of them, at least not to start, right? You're going to want to choose which of those things you want to be the best at. And building a good adventuring party often means balancing characters between you and the rest of your party who have strengths in different areas. All right, and back to you, Julia, to tell us all about races.
All right, thanks, Jane. Adventurers come in all shapes and sizes, from the smallest, most nimble gnomes and halflings to towering dragonborns. The race that you choose will give you innate advantages and disadvantages. And here are the races that you can find in the player's handbook. There are also a bunch of other races that you can get in some of the other supplementary materials. We're just going to cover kind of the major high fantasy, Lord of the Rings-esque races that you find in the player's handbook. So the first one we're going to talk about is dwarves. Dwarves are bold and hardy and skilled as miners and stoneworkers, and they also make strong fighters. They usually hail from the mountains or hill country. In the game, dwarves get a +2 bonus to their Constitution score, so they're extra hardy, and will have some advantages based on their resilience. The next race we have is elves, who are one of the longest lived races, and they seem otherworldly to the other races. They are magical and full of a strange kind of grace. Elves often make great magic users, such as wizards or druids. In the game, for ability scores, elves get bonuses to wisdom and also to speed and stealth. Halflings are a short, practical race, usually hailing from small, tight-knit villages and cherishing the comforts of home. The nimble halfling can make a great rogue or bard. Lightfoot halflings get +1 bonuses to their charisma and +2 to dexterity, and are naturally stealthy, lucky, and brave. The humans, you can play a human. You don't have to be a fantasy race in this game. You can be a human. And in the world of D&D, humans are a great all-around race. They're adaptable, found throughout the world, and belong to every class. If you choose to play a human, you'll get a +1 bonus to each of your ability scores. Dragonborn. Dragonborn have inherited traits from dragon ancestors, and they look like a humanoid dragon, although they lack wings and a tail, which is a bummer, but you know. They can claim heritage from a wide variety of dragon ancestries, and depending on which dragon ancestry you pick, you get a different ability and traits. They're often great warriors, and their strength scores are increased by 2, and their charisma by 1. Next, we have gnomes, which are full of energy and they delight in life. And they are one of the smallest and slightest races, so they have great skill in tinkering and magic. They are very intelligent with a +2 bonus to their intelligence score, and also very cunning. Half-elves have a lineage coming from both elves and humans, so they never fully fit into either world. They are often very charismatic and charming and are prone to becoming wanderers. Their charisma gets a +2 bonus, and the other 2 ability scores of your choice also increase by 1. Next, we have half-orcs. Even more so than half-elves, half-orcs find themselves torn between worlds, often seen as outcasts in society. They are sometimes viewed with suspicion by other races, but are prone to become adventurers. Their strength score increases by 2 and their constitution by 1. And the last race we're going to talk about here today is tieflings. They look mostly human, but they have an infernal heritage that has made them distrusted by many of the other races. So a lot of times they'll have like horns or ruddy colored skin or creepy looking eyes. So they're human, but not quite human. They can trace their lineage back to a demon or fiend. Tieflings are natural magic users, and their intelligence score increases by 1 and their charisma by 2. And next we have Jane, who is going to talk about the different classes that you can choose from.
Sure, absolutely. So if your race is the species you're born, your class is what you choose to be in D&D, or your profession. Many of these have subclasses, right, or different specialties, and I won't get too deep into those right now because we only have so much time. But the first class is Barbarian. So barbarians are your warriors. Their big feature is that they can enter something called Rage, which makes them better both at attacking and at not taking damage. So barbarians really are your tanks, right? They have a ton of HP. They maybe won't do the most damage compared to, say, your wizard, who might send down a massive fire spell and hit everybody on the battlefield. But the barbarian can soak up the damage that they're getting from enemies. Every time you level up as a barbarian, you roll a 12-sided die, so you can get up to 12 new hit points. Most characters, that it's a smaller die and a smaller number that you can possibly get. In fact, nobody else uses a d12, so yeah, those barbarians are really the tough frontline fighters. Then you've got bards. Bards are notorious for being a little bit smarmy, but often in a fun way to play with. So they're your charismatic. Their role on a team is often to buff other players, right, to help out their teammates. It's a supportive role in battle, but they often shine in more social settings. So if you think you might solve a problem as a party by negotiating instead of by fighting, you'd be glad to have your bard there. Their main ability score, where you're going to want to put most of your points, is charisma. For barbarian, I forgot to mention its strength. So next you have clerics. Clerics are your healers for your party, usually. There are some different kinds, right? They have a tie to a deity that gives them magical powers. Again, usually that will be a healing role, but there are some other types of clerics as well. Their main ability score is wisdom. Then you've got druids. Druids are very crunchy. They're the nature wizards. They can turn into animals often, so that can be pretty cool. Yeah, so if you want a character that does very natural magic, they're the one for you. Their main ability score is wisdom. Then you've got fighter. Fighter is your standard get in there and deal some damage, right? Your knights or yeah, any character who their best thing, the thing they're best at is fighting, is probably a fighter, unsurprisingly. So whereas a barbarian is made to soak up damage, a fighter is made to deal damage, primarily. Strength or dexterity are going to be their main abilities. Then you've got monks. Monks are masters of martial arts. Dexterity is definitely their biggest score. So whereas a knight keeps himself safe with big bulky armor and hitting real hard, a monk can get in and do some damage and then get out of the way so that the enemy can't ever hit them.
If you literally want to be able to punch your enemies in the face, play a monk.
There you go. Next, you've got paladins. Paladins are holy warriors bound to a sacred oath. They're gonna be they're gonna be very honorable and probably a little annoying, but often in a fun way. I say this with love. I have a paladin in my party. Strength or charisma are going to be their biggest scores. They also are very inspiring to the characters around them. So they can fulfill sort of a support role as well. And if you don't have a barbarian in your party, a paladin can be a really good tank as well. Then you've got rangers. Rangers attack from a distance. They're your trackers. They're your survivalists. And yeah, they're very good at using ranged weapons. So dexterity is usually their biggest score as well, or wisdom. You've got rogues after that. Rogues are your sneaky guys. Anything, let's see, the book called it a scoundrel who uses stealth and trickery to overcome obstacles and enemies. If you want a lockpicked, you want a rogue on your party. Dexterity is their main score. Okay, then we get into the three really heavy-hitting magic user classes, all at the end of the alphabet. So there's the distinction between these three classes is how they get their magic. Sorcerers are magic users who were born with it. Their main ability score is charisma. Warlocks are people who wish they were sorcerers but weren't, and so made a deal with an otherworldly entity for some magic power. Maybe it's somebody very nice, maybe it's somebody kind of sketchy, but either way, there's going to be some complications that come along with that. They also use charisma as their main ability score. And finally, our last one, and possibly one of the ones you've been waiting for, wizards. Wizards could have been warlocks, but maybe had a little more sense and were a little more patient. And instead of making a bargain for their power, they went to school and studied and learned. So intelligence is their main ability score. And yeah, they're probably some of your heaviest damage dealers, believe it or not, because some of their spells can be very, very scary.
They're very squishy.
Exactly, right. They are made of glass. Put them at the back of your party.
Their constitution is not high.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, so that is all of the main classes. As with races, there are some other ones added in other manuals. There's some other, again, there's subclasses that do some different things within those, but those are the big ones.
Out of curiosity, I wanted to ask you guys, if you were, say you had a party of 4 people, what would be your ideal party makeup? What classes would you have in your party?
You always need a rogue, because there's always a door somewhere that needs to be opened that you can't get through. So somebody who has the skills to get you into the locked doors is definitely a necessity, as well as somebody who can kind of stand on the front line. So, that could be a barbarian or a fighter.
Or a paladin, yeah.
Or paladin, paladins too. And you need usually somebody who can do a high amount of damage. That can double with your rogue. Your rogue can be kind of a high DPS character, and then there's other ones that can do a lot of damage too. like wizards. In the magic classes, you can build them so many ways. Like, they can be high DPS, they can be kind of battlefield control. They can do a lot of different things.
And we should say there's no real like ideal party makeup. Play what is fun to you, but you can talk a little bit about what types of things your party should be able to do. Have someone that can heal, have someone that can fight, etc.
A lesson in party makeup from my long-running game where our characters are all 13th level now. None of us had ever played before when we started. Our DM had never DM'd, right? So we were very much learning on our feet. And it became so apparent that we needed a healer that my formerly barbarian character did some dealings to become a cleric because she could not deal with her fiance perpetually nearly dying as the paladin who wouldn't get off the front lines with no healer.
And several classes will have some healing ability or healing spells they can pick up, but oftentimes that's your cleric or your bard, especially your cleric, that's going to be a healer.
I think druids are pretty decent.
Druids can, yeah.
Yeah. But cleric is sort of the classic, if you want somebody just to be your medicine chest, that's usually the class you're gonna go for.
So yeah, always make sure you've got some healing in your group, whether that's a dedicated one, or you can also have a combination of half healers. So paladins got a little bit of healing.
That's true.
And I think, bards do too, I think. So you can have kind of half healers, but otherwise you're gonna have to carry around an awful lot of potions.
Well, and the thing we didn't mention is you can multi-class. Again, would not recommend that for first-time players early on, right? But as you gain levels, you can choose to gain levels in more than one class. So you can have a character who is a fighter and a cleric and won't be as good at doing either as somebody who is just one or just the other, but will be able to cover more roles on the team.
All right, so moving on, a little bit more you'll need to know as you're building out your character is you do also choose a background. And that's just, the walk of life you came from, whether you were, an entertainer or a criminal or, you're a soldier, war veteran. And what that does is gives you some extra proficiencies, some extra things that you're good at, as well as you might have some starting equipment or languages that because of your background. So the handbook has a list of the backgrounds available. You can find them online as well. And we'll provide you with some links and resources to find some of this stuff. And then of course, least important as far as filling out your character sheet, but important for how you're going to end up playing your character is to think about your personality, your belief system, your looks, the background of your character that's going to all pull together to form who you are playing. And again, that's stuff that you can figure out as you go along a little bit too. It's not essential to know everything before you start. So the next most important thing that you need to do is figure out what your ability scores are. We've talked about them, the 6 ability scores, but we haven't explained yet where those come from. So there's a few options for determining your ability scores. There's some that are simple and some that I think get kind of needlessly complex. So the very simplest one you can start with is there's something called the standard array, and they list this in the handbook. You can also find it online, and it just gives you a set of 6 numbers, and then you can decide which of your scores you want to put those numbers in. So that's you have 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. So if you're a fighter, you're probably not going to put that 8 into strength. You're going to want to give yourself a higher ability score for strength. And if you're a bard, you're going to want to be super charismatic, so maybe that's where you'll put your highest score. So that's one method. Another method that is commonly used is rolling some dice. And for this, you will need 4 D6 dice. These are your standard dice that come in most, game sets. And you don't necessarily need 4, you can just roll the same dice 4 times. But what you do is you roll 4 D6s. Subtract the lowest number you rolled, and then add the other 3 together. And that creates 1 ability score. So you can see this method takes a little longer, but you have the chance of rolling something really high or really low. So for example, say I rolled a 2, a 5, a 4, and a 3. I'm not going to count the 2, so I'm going to add the others together. So I get a total of 12, and that's 1 of my ability scores. And you do that 5 more times. So it's a little chancier. You don't know what you might get. You might get something really good, and it takes longer. So if you want to just use the standard array, you certainly can to get started. And then finally, the ability score itself, what it does basically is affects when you roll your dice in the game, when you roll to attack someone, when you roll a skill check to see how well you do at something, you're going to add a number to your dice roll. So you're going to roll your standard D20 dice. It looks kind of like this. And then you're going to add a number to it. But you're not going to add that ability score because that would be too easy. Instead, you're going to add your modifier. I don't know how much detail we have time to go into as far as the modifiers go and how they work. You can find the chart in the handbook, or we'll provide a link to a chart online as well. But say I have an ability score of 15, my modifier is +2, and that's what I add to my dice roll. On the other hand, if I have an ability score of 8, and I'm not very talented in that area, then I actually have a -1. So if I rolled my D20 and I got 13, I'm actually going to take 1 away, and I got a 12 total on my roll. So your ability scores basically affect just about any roll that you're going to make in game, right, guys?
Yes, and they also add into something called skills. Were you planning on talking about those in a moment, or?
Yeah, we can go into that real quick. We've got a little bit of time, I think, to wrap this up.
Yep. So skills are places where you use your ability scores, but maybe you do a little better. So say you've got an intelligence score of 14, right? So that would be a +2. But maybe you're proficient, so you're really good at history, right? Maybe you studied it in wizard school. You would add not only that +2 to every roll to find out something about history, but also your proficiency bonus, which increases as your character levels.
Yep. So yeah, your proficiency bonus and the skills that you have are all going to influence the actual dice rolls that you make. And then we also wanted to mention hit points. We talked about them a little bit. Different classes start with different amounts of hit points. That's basically just the measure of how much damage you can take. Every time you get hit and damage is done, your hit points are lowered. Once you hit 0, you're not automatically dead. Your character passes out, and then there's an opportunity for another player in your party to heal you, or you're going to have to do something called death saving throws, where you're going to roll the dice to see if you survive or not. And then every time you take a rest, you can get some hit points back. You can also use like healing spells and potions to regain hit points. Do either of you guys want to talk a little bit about, I guess the last thing is just armor and equipment and what kind of stuff you're going to get?
I can talk about that.
Sure.
So unless you're a monk, you're not going to be going out and beating up all of the monsters with your fists. So you're going to need some equipment for your character. Mostly weapons and armor. There's a whole bunch of other miscellaneous equipment you can pick from in the book, and your character gets a certain amount of starting gold based on their class that you'll roll, or your DM will give you an amount of gold to spend. And there are 2 main kinds of equipment that we're going to talk about: armor and weapons. Armor is grouped into 3 classes. So there is a light armor, medium, and heavy. And what class you are will determine the kind of armor that is good for you to wear. You can wear any armor, but if you don't have a proficiency in it from your class, it will give you disadvantages. And then heavy armor, obviously, if you walk around in plate mail, you're going to be hard to hit. But there are some other disadvantages. You're also going to be slow, and you're probably going to be very noisy. So you're not going to be the best at sneaking around if you're wearing heavy armor. So you have to kind of take into account what types of activities in the game your character is going to do when you make your armor choices. And then for weapons, there's two main categories of those. We've got ranged and melee. So we've got long, distance weapons and close-up weapons. And also there's a couple of categories in there, whether they're simple or martial. And again, your class is going to give you some proficiencies that you should take into account when you choose your weapons. But other than that, you can kind of pick whatever sounds fun, like, long sword, short sword, daggers, all kinds of weapon choices that you can pick based on the imagining that you have for your character plan.
So to bring everything together, step 1 of character creation, choose your race. Step 2, choose the class, the type of player you're going to be. Step 3, you can narrow that down a little bit and get into choosing your background and personality. Step 4, once you've got all that ironed out, then you're ready to actually fill out your ability and skill scores and roll some dice. Step 5, you can figure out all the equipment and gear that you need. And then step 6, if you've already got a party together, people you're going to play with, this is where you can kind of talk and maybe figure out a group history if you guys all know each other or if you're just now meeting, and what kind of goals you might have. So that's really about it for character creation and some of the absolute basics of D&D. We're going to come back and show you a little bit more gameplay, as well as some information on how to DM, how to be the dungeon master, the person who is controlling the game, and some resources for playing both in person and online. Did either of you have anything to add?
I think that's a pretty good overview. I would add that if all of this discussion of rules and building characters makes your head hurt, there are lots of resources out there that we'll talk about more in the next video, but especially D&D Beyond, I'd like to point to right away. You can create up to 5 characters there for free. It walks you through step by step, super easy for a first timer, makes it really easy to make sure all your numbers are right, that you're keeping right with the rules. So yeah, that can be a great way to make a really quick start.
I should add too, when we've referred to, this is in the book, what we're referring to is specifically the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Player's Handbook, which you can buy a hard copy or find it online, but you can also, for free right now, D&D Beyond also has the basic rule set available. So it doesn't have everything, but it has what you would need to get a game started and get going and play your first few sessions probably. So you can look on D&D Beyond and find that, as well as they do have their starter set available for free right now, which actually comes with a free adventure to get you started. It's called Lost Mine of Phandelver, and 5 level 1 characters if you want to start with something that's pre-made. So there's some good free resources right now if everything that we talked about seems very confusing.
I think something we also discussed that we wanted to really encourage people to do, if how gameplay works is a little intimidating, there are a lot of great actual play podcasts and YouTube shows and so on out there. 2 of the biggest ones are Critical Role and The Adventure Zone. I'm not a big Critical Role person. I will say The Adventure Zone is not particularly kid-friendly, but if you're an adult or a teen and want to check it out, go for it. And there are some like whole family friendly podcasts and YouTube shows out there as well. Watching other people play can not only be a great way to learn the rules, it can be really entertaining.
Yeah. Yes, but don't be intimidated, because some of these actual plays are led by people who have been playing for years and years and years. Critical Role, they're almost all professional voice actors, so they're very good at their character voices, so don't let that intimidate you.
Whereas the Adventure Zone is great because it's for people with very limited D&D experience in the past, playing a game that starts as the Lost Mines of Phandelver, right, as the starter set game. So you're watching them learn in real time. So it is a very low barrier for entry on that one.
Yes, so yeah, check out some of those if you just kind of want to see how to and see other people play before you really jump in. Check out all of the free resources available online. And then next time you see us, we're going to tell you a little bit more about gameplay and how it works, what all those dice mean. And also, Julie is going to talk a little bit more about how to be a dungeon master, how to run the game, and Jane's going to tell you a little bit about ways you can actually play online if you have people you want to play with that you are socially distanced from right now. So we will see you back at another Make It with NPL to take you on further adventures in Dungeons and Dragons. Thanks, guys.
Kristi.
All right.